Hello, hello. Hi, how are you? Welcome back to Life Trials by EAC with yours truly, Miss Elizabeth. I hope everybody's doing very well today. Thank you again for joining me on this beautiful Friday afternoon here on the East Coast of Florida. And Davey, it is about 2:53 p.m. and it is a beautiful day, that is for sure. Florida is a beautiful place to live. It's very free, open, and very prosperous. So find yourself here on the sunny side of the East Coast. So remember, please ask me how you can have your business promoted on my podcast. All you need to do is send me an email if you're interested, and I would love to discuss your ideas. It doesn't matter how big or how small your business is. I work with everybody. Doesn't even matter if you have employees or you have none. It does not matter. I want to work with you. So I also wanted to further say thank you to everybody. And if you would like to support this podcast, please visit the website below and scrolling beneath here on your screen. And also visit the platforms that are hosting my podcast and subscribe to my channel on YouTube, which would mean the most world to me if you guys can do that for me, because YouTube is very hard. So today, I've been a little bit behind with releasing my episodes, especially on the daily assessment of the news. And it's been a little difficult because I've been very busy working and just nonstop working. A lot of research for these episodes. And today's going to be an interesting one. So get ready. Buckle in there for this blockbuster episode. No, I'm just kidding. Well, in today's episode, I wanted to bring to you not the daily debacle of today's news, because I am about 2 weeks behind with respects to the headliners of the political news in our crazy world. And I need to discuss the 6 gun control executive orders the Biden administration signed about 2 weeks ago for the uselessness that it's going to be with respects to enforcement. It's actually really sad to see how the only ones that are actually going to be affected by this mandate are law-abiding citizens, and it doesn't really do penis for criminals. And they're still going to steal guns. They're going to commit crimes. Doesn't really matter. You can implement gun control laws, mandates, executive orders, whatever you want to call it. You could do it to your blue in the face, but it doesn't really change anything. But whatever. Especially with this administration, this has been just executive order. I think that they have forgotten that there is a legislative branch that they need to, recognize, I would say, because they don't make laws. The legislative branch makes laws, but whatever. Once again, what does these gun executive orders, gun control measures, gun control executive orders do? They do nothing in any capacity. What they don't do as well is that they don't address any gun-related crimes that are going on in democratically held cities that are riddled with crime, and violent crime is actually on the rise in majority of democratically held cities like Chicago, DC, Portland. I mean, the list can go on and on and on. New York City, right? The gun control executive orders that were just issued 2.5 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, do absolutely nothing to address the major cartel-oriented crime that's going on in American cities. And it's really interesting to see how these same cities that are riddled with rising crime rates already have heavy gun control enforcement laws, statutes on the books, right? And look at that. Long and behold, where we are today, it's still on the rise in those same cities. But the Democrats don't want you to see that. They refuse to bring to you the actual facts, the data presented with respects to what gun control mandates, laws, statutes, executive orders, issues, whatever you want to call them. They don't want you to see the truth and the reality of those facts. So in today's episode, I will further be discussing the crux of the issue at hand here with such executive orders to address gun control, because there's an underlining factor here, okay? So that's where I will be assessing a number of highly publicized studies conducted on gun control that establishes to some capacity the underlining philosophy and perspectives that were formed and understood to be the considered foundational basis utilized by political advocates, political elites, those, that actually have authority to make legislation. It is used by these same people and those in the anti-gun lobby firms that are usually 100% behind all of these gun control executive orders, mandates, laws, issues, whatever. It's utilized by these same people, right? And that's what these studies will be discussing, is how and why these actors believe these things. And this is their justification for implementing such gun control. And what I further wanted to assess here with respects to, implementing such mandates that really don't address much, because gun control is a really broad, generalized topic with respects to public safety and how we implement certain measures and certain, strategies with respects to how we need to address public safety in certain cities, municipalities. And what I found interesting about these studies, that I'm really not going to go into the nitty gritty and the numerical aspect of these studies, but I wanted to just give a brief overview of the information that I found relevant in these studies. So what is interesting here is that these studies studied these, I would say, I think it said 2 to 3 different types of perspectives that formed the basis to implementing gun control laws. And what I found very interesting was that what it further detailed was how it measured the ineffectiveness and the effectiveness by answering this one question. So these studies pretty much formed their entire experiment and their actual study on just this one question, which is, does gun control reduce crime, or does crime increase gun control? So it was a little bit confusing even for me to be able to relay that information to my audience in today's episode, because it is just such a complex issue in this country that has been ongoing for many, many years now. And it's obviously been very, very heated. It's been a very heated topic of discussion in our country because of all the school shootings, because of all the mass shootings in different places. And it's just been riddled with a lot of biased information. The media doesn't do its job anymore to relay the information regardless of their emotional, their own emotional feelings about the issue at hand. And I wanted to at least let you guys know the name of this study. So it is based on the question, does gun control reduce crime or does crime increase gun control, which was done by John C. Morehouse and Brent Wanner. It was retrieved from the Cato Journal and from the Cato Institution. So I don't know if you do know or do not know, I am fairly educated in the sense that I have my master's degree. So for me, research and assessing certain issues and trying to form a cohesive, I guess, comprehensive analysis of such information is my thing. I like to assess things. I like to see why it is that certain issues come to fruition and how that specific flourishing occurs. That makes much sense. So in order to summarize this study, so I don't confuse you guys, which I hope I have not yet, but what I really took from this specific study was that it fairly concluded that such public safety measures like the enforcement of gun control are hard to measure in its actual effectiveness due to conflicting data. And why is it that the reason that it's conflicting data? Because every single state in our country has different gun laws and statutes on the books, and they all have issued different types of specific mandates depending on the municipality, the city, state, or state orders, whatever, which obviously further complicates an already very complicated topic to even merely litigate in a court of public opinion. And just really looking at the study and trying to take that and tying it into the recently implemented gun control executive orders by the Biden administration, it really all goes hand in hand. So what I really wanted to do with this specific study is look at it from the lens that why is it that people view this specific topic in such a very passionate manner, especially one specific party. So that is one of the main reasons why I decided to really focus mainly on this specific study that then assessed other studies on gun control. So obviously political consultants make a killing in this country, and political consultants are used for providing their own supposed good advice with respects to the issue that they're supposed to assist in advising. And long behold, I mean, if you're going to hire a political consultant that is going to align with your political views, you're always going to just see the same issue in that same lens, if that makes sense. So that is really the underlining issue here. Is I felt that in order to really provide to you guys the reason why I believe these recently new executive orders are as wasteful as the paper that they were signed on, I really wanted to at least provide to you some reasoning behind my conclusion on this. And I really feel that being able to look at research and studies that have been done on this specific, topic, I felt that would provide some insight into how I view this specific issue for you guys, and the way I see gun control and the way in which it's implemented and how it is implemented. I just feel that this was a rush to just do something just to say you did something. But overall, I found it very intriguing to be able to, tie this all in together. But, hey, it might make sense. It might not make sense to some people, but What I just really wanted to provide to you guys today was that gun control laws do not reduce the number of violent crimes that occur. Okay? And it's not going to then conclude that, oh, less guns mean less crime. What? Doesn't make sense. So when I take a specific topic and I look at it from my perspective and where I'm standing, I try to get the best unbiased, information, data. Really, I look at a whole variety of different, different things that I want to utilize for my episodes, whether it's a research study or it's an article, whether it's, something, an actual legislation that has already been implemented. I really wanted to at least provide some avenue for you guys because a lot of people really don't know where I stand with respects to gun control because I really don't post a lot about it, but I think that this whole new executive order that was just mandated by the executive branch is really going to do absolutely nothing. And it's just wasteful. And I really hope that the assessment that I just gave right now was not wasteful. But I further wanted to go into answering this question as to whether does gun control reduce crime or does crime increase gun control? But I first wanted to look at the top 20 worst cities to live in due to high crime rates, right? Equals what they had indicated as their main overall type of crime was gun violence. So I'm only going to list the top 10. And the first indicator I want to bring to the front here is that the first 10, which are the top 10 worst, are all run by Democrats. All right, so we're going to go one by one. Number 1, Detroit, Michigan. So the violent crime rate per 1,000 residents is 19.5%. So your chance of being a victim there is 1 in 51 people. Number 2, St. Louis, Missouri. 19.2%, 1 in 51 people. Memphis, Tennessee, 19%, 1 in 52 people. Number 4, Baltimore, 19% and 1 in 53 people. Monroe, Louisiana, 17.9%, 1 in 55 people. Danville, Illinois, 17.5%, 1 in 56 people. Wilmington, Delaware, 15.8%, and 1 in 62 people. Alexandria, Louisiana, 15.8%, 1 in 63 people. Camden, New Jersey, 15.7%, 1 in 63 people. And then number 10, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 15.7%, and your chance of being a victim there is 1 in 63 people. So, I mean, you can keep going on and on. Number 15 over here, San Bernardino, baby. Kansas City, Canton, Ohio, Chester, Pennsylvania. I mean, it's like all ran by Democrats. And then it's really weird how Democrats are the same people that are forcefully trying to implement such absurd gun control measures, but then cannot even run their own town, to run their own cities, for Christ's sakes. So this is something to me that stood out when trying to further understand the conclusion of the study that pretty much, concluded that the data is conflicting. There's obviously major problems with this underlining philosophy that is utilized by, the legislative elites of our country as a mechanism to justify their, implementation of such absurd ways of controlling gun violence, you know? So it's just weird. Like I needed to understand these things because they all go hand in hand. So, to further go into this question of does gun control reduce crime or does crime increase gun control, and why the perspectives are confusing for policymakers and why they just radically take on any perspective and they just decide on whatever it is that their political party believes, and whatever, doesn't even matter. We hinder on constitutional rights. It's interesting because the reason why these perspectives are confusing for these people is because the data itself is conflicting and it's biased. So it's really interesting when you look at it from this perspective that I'm providing to you today, not just the emotional aspect of this issue. Oh, we have a mass shooting at a school. Okay, now we need to implement gun control measures that literally are so, absurd and infringe on the Second Amendment to the point that we're just going to take the guns back. Whatever it is. It's crazy that they form such policies based on such conflicting and biased information that it's very scary. So, as I had previously mentioned, these two studies that I really went into detail and tried to provide my cohesive understanding of it, further concluded that gun control, the first perspective, stated that gun control reduces violent crime, and the 9 studies that this specific study researched actually found no reduction in violent crime because of the gun control measures. I'm like, I don't even understand that. So the 2 studies that what they specifically did was then to answer that question of does gun control reduce crime or does crime increase gun control, they took 9 other studies and utilized that to attempt to answer this question with respects to why these specific perspectives are used by policymakers as justification for such horrifying, scary public safety measures. It's really weird. Like, they further concluded that utilizing these studies found no actual reduction in the violent crime because of the gun control measures. But what the first study was trying to, I guess, go with was that whole issue of, gun control reduces violent crime and it reduces the number of violent crimes, because then that in turn reduces the number of prevalent firearms. So, it's just very conflicting. Like, a lot of the studies that have been done itself have even been very confusing to me. And the advocates for gun control take this conflicting data, very biased and ill-informed information, and confuse the policymaker. But as we all well know how politicking works in America, it's like, just confuse, and confuse. It's easier that way. You implement the law just like they did with Obamacare. They never read the law itself. They just implemented it. And yeah, I'm a little shocked by the fact that I'm still a little on the, I guess, confusing aspect of why it is these studies that I decided to utilize for my episode today even seemed right now kind of confusing for me to understand. But what the study tried to answer with respects to how or whether or not if gun control reduces crime or if crime increases gun control, the first perspective that I tried to, I guess, relay was based on they believe that gun control laws reduce the cause itself and the reduction of the number of violent crimes that occur, and that in turn causes the reduction of the prevalence of firearms, which I had just mentioned. So they believe that gun control laws reduce the number of violent crimes, which that in turn then reduces the prevalence of firearms. And in that pretty much concluded for them was that less guns mean less crime, which is an obvious absurd perspective on gun control. And it took me a while to just even relay this message to you guys, get this perspective just really in a very profound layman terms. What they really believe is that less guns mean less crime. And obviously we know in this country that's not a real argument for this issue. And the second perspective was that because of high crime rates, that is a justifiable reason for more stringent gun control laws. And that specific secondary perspective is more of a relationship versus the causal connection between gun control and high crime rates. So I really do apologize if the first, I would say 10 to 15 minutes of this episode seemed kind of confusing. I really wanted to at least clear up that confusion and provide to you the perspectives that are utilized for policymaking. That's really the reasoning why I provided these research studies today within this episode, is because I needed for you guys to understand why. Okay? So this then leads to my next question as to why is gun control so hard to measure in its effectiveness, and what the study I guess concluded was that being able to estimate the effect of gun control on crime rates is problematic on its face. So being able to estimate the, I guess, effectiveness of gun control on crime rate is an issue. And what they further provide as their reasoning as to why this data is very, conflicting, and why it is, they don't really use or I guess advocate for this to be the, I guess, Bible perspective or just, I guess, the foundational reasoning for policymakers to justify such implementation, because there is so much confliction, and it's problematic with respects to the outcomes that are established with trying to understand the actual effectiveness of such laws that are being implemented that hinder our ability to live our lives freely and practice our constitutional rights. So the problem is that gun control is an umbrella term that covers a variety of aspects that relate to gun control. The first one being laws. The second being those same laws that prohibit ownership with respects to firearms. It also addresses qualifications. I'm over here like 1, 2, 3. I don't even know where I'm at. So gun control also discusses the qualifications with respects to possessing firearms, being able to get back your licensing and that type of stuff. It also is, formed under providing information with respects to defining the classes of firearms. And also these measures representing discrete legislative acts passed on different governing bodies. So what that pretty much means is that the different municipalities, cities, states that have conflicting gun laws. You have, perfect example is state of California. You pretty much cannot even own a gun over there. There's no stand your ground laws, none of that. In the state of Florida, you can own and possess firearms without an issue, and there are standing ground laws here. So obviously, on the state to state level, with respects to measuring the effectiveness of such gun control is just conflicting. And that's one of the reasons why such data on gun control is so biased and problematic to utilize as justification for, implementation of such laws, mandates, executive orders, whatever you want to call it. Very thirsty. Also, the effectiveness of a particular gun control statute depends not only on it being on the books, but the degree to which the law is enforced itself. So, perfect example, Washington, D.C., if you're a law-abiding congresswoman, you have a right to possess a firearm. She has her concealed weapons license. She could be arrested and put into jail for a very long time. That could almost amount to if you go and carjack somebody at 13 years old, you could actually go out of, just get out of jail and whatever, and still have that same, with respects to like sentencing and stuff, it aligns on the same thing. So that is another aspect of why gun control and the stature that is implemented so completely, it's very different when you look at the different states and then you want to break it down into the different, aspects of the gun control measure. It's just fucking confusing on its face, and it's hard to enforce when you have one aspect of it being one way somewhere and then one other aspect somewhere else being the complete opposite. It just provides to you a very fucked up, collectively incompetent fucking foundational basis for such policy making, especially with respects to public policy. So, I think that this was obviously a fairly complicated subject to kind of, I guess, talk about, especially implementing this study. So a good example is, two jurisdictions have the same gun law statutes, but experience different effects because one can be more devoted than the other to the enforcement of such regulations. So, it just really depends on who and where you are. And that's one of the biggest reasons why gun control on its face is a very conflicting, biased public policy issue that needs to be reformed and needs to be researched on a more partisan manner. And it's crazy because when you look at it from the enforcement aspect of gun laws, it always must be taken into account to accurately assess gun control. So I'll repeat that. The enforcement of gun laws must always be taken into account to accurately assess gun control. So whenever you want to assess whether or not certain measures can be implemented with respects to gun control, you need to look at the enforcement aspect of such laws before really going into the assessing aspect of it. You have to have already understood that the enforcement part of it must be included. And that's the issue right here, is that are these people going to enforce any of these mandates that they issue? No, man, So that's the biggest issue here. It's just on its face, gun control in this country is super, super problematic and needs to be reevaluated. Like, he should be making a commission on this shit, not on whether we should pack the Supreme Court, which is going to be the next episode. But it's interesting because what I wanted to further kind of look at was, why is it that the enforcement aspect is so difficult for certain jurisdictions to enforce? And why is it that these same jurisdictions like Chicago cannot at all in any capacity reduce crime at all with as much enforcement that they have in that city? They have one of the worst gun-friendly laws in the entire nation, right? But they have such a problem in such enforcement because you look at the rates of crime, especially the rates of violent crime. It's just so crazy when you look at this whole issue on its face. Why is it that the enforcement aspect of gun control is so difficult for such jurisdictions that are the same ones that want to implement even more stringent laws to hinder your ability to practice your constitutional right to possess a firearm and possess a concealed weapons license, have such an issue actually enforcing such mandates? Why? I did a comparison here, like Chicago versus Ocala. You want to know why such enforcement is such an issue? Is because the political agendas that these people have. Obviously, the political parties and the influence within the state at hand here. Okay? Look at Chicago, riddled with crime. People die every fucking weekend there. Children under the age of 5 die. Criminals are running the show in Chicago. They have these most stringent laws, the most strictest on the books, but they have such an issue enforcing their own laws, right? But they want to keep putting more and more and more. Also, you know why enforcement is so difficult? The demonizing law enforcement agencies like the federal and state and local level police departments, you're going to have that gap with respects to enforcing such measures because you have those same people that are implementing the stringent hindering laws upon our rights as United States citizens are the same people that are saying, take the cops. We don't like cops. We hate cops. Cops kill everybody. They kill all black people. It's disgusting. It doesn't even make sense anymore. Like the argument no longer can stand because it's just so nonsensical. And enforcement is also an issue because these same people that are given the power to implement such absurd, mandates for public safety are the same people that empower criminals. You look at the Los Angeles prosecutor. He's literally reducing the mandates, the sentences or the mandates in which judges can issue the sentencing for certain types of crimes, whatever, further victimizing the victims by reducing, like I just mentioned, the sentencing of those that commit violent crimes. I don't, it's just the logic behind this argument. It's really interesting. And taking all of this into consideration, putting more mandates, laws, executive orders into place just to further push the gun control agenda isn't going to make much long-term beneficial impact upon those that these mandates are supposed to serve, right? So I apologize if this was maybe a little bit confusing, but to really conclude this episode on whether if gun control reduces crime or if crime increases gun control, there is no answer because you look at the information provided, the research done, it's conflicting, and it's insane that our policymakers really use this type of information and uses as the form, and they form this as the basis for justifying such implementation of such radical public safety measures like gun control. And they just really do it on a more generalized sense without really being more specific. And that's dangerous. It's a dangerous, slippery slope there, buddy. And I'm scared. I really am glad that I have possessed all my firearms since I was 21 years old. I haven't gone to the gun range because I'm scared that we're going to run out of bullets or not be able to have the ability to access or purchase that in the time to come. So it's really scary time that we're living in. So I really hope that people further understand the importance of being able to possess a firearm and being able to practice your constitutional right and practice the Second Amendment and allow for rightfully owned, you are allowed as a United States citizen to possess a firearm. It is your right to protect yourself from evil. I don't understand what this administration is trying to do. This is not Australia. This is not Italy. It's not Canada. This is not Russia. It's not fucking Russia. No, it's not. So we really need to have a better, more cohesive, collective dialogue on this issue of gun control, because the way that things are going now, by the time this guy leaves office, we might not even have a Second Amendment anymore. I don't know if you saw that press conference where he said that no amendment is like 100% guaranteed, or I mean, I don't even remember. I'm like paraphrasing, but that's really scary, you know? So when our founding fathers assured that such rights are not given by the government, but it's given by a higher authority, our God. And whatever that God is, it's that God. So if you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And please go on my website and please subscribe to those platforms that are hosting my podcast, Live Trials by EAC, with yours truly. I would also really appreciate if you would also consider supporting me on my website, elizabethcharney.com. Any donation is enormously appreciated to keep this podcast running. And if you want to have your business promoted on this podcast, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is elizabethcharney. I'm sorry, what did I say that? Elizabeth@elizabethcharney.com or live trials by EAC at iCloud.com. Thank you again, guys, for tuning in. I love you. Life Trials by EAC with yours truly. See you guys very soon. Bye-bye.